Chart update 24th May. A lengthy look at abnormal. You could have been out of this with 0.2 days worth of deaths, but your government didn't want that. Note to censors, we use only government data. If you have a problem with the results, speak to the government. We're just going to do a basic summary today without the specialised look at New York and the UK, because frankly the basics are bad enough. So we're going straight to the charts, and yet again we've got a little extra, and it's a doozy. That third metre at bottom, days deaths as a function of standard mortality, aka the lyometer. Alongside the figures in the stats table, you can see that the day mortality peaks at 65% on the chart and in the stats, i.e. 2/3 of 2464 standard day deaths, 9 per 1,000 per 100 million population. Overall, since the first Covid-19 death for that country, Covid-19 reported deaths represent 20% of that country's mortality. Now think about that. Here's Italy, one of the worst hit nations in the world, and even allowing its numbers to be real and noting that the mortality indicators shows the same rather sharp pyramid, bizarre, Italy is over, and it represents 20% of your Italy's ordinary mortality. 20%, and that's what you gave up democracy for. 20% for how long? 22nd of Feb to 24th May, 3 months. 4 years, 1914 to 1918. 6 years, 1939 to 1945. 3 months, 2020. 2 wars supposedly defend freedom and democracy to save Europe and the world. And for the 3 months of 20% higher, and of course none of those people, 99% of whom were sick anyway in Italy, were going to die, sad but true, for 3 months of slightly higher mortality, our nation's people got so scared, they willingly gave up liberty, gave up democracy, gave up earning and said, please lying politicians, save us. You're our only hope. Did they forget something? Who, before Covid-19, seriously believed that politicians always told the truth and were the saints and saviours of society? The Guardian in the UK has a button called Tory Speaks Destroying Society, and it auto-prints an article damning the Tories. Okay, I made that up, you get the point. Where were they the moment Covid-19 came along? I don't follow rigorously, but I'm pretty sure they were on the "damn Johnson, he should have done more" boat. Maybe not, but you get the point. The media never harangued the politicians. Where are you getting these absurd figures from? Only now, 2 months post-lockdown, are media articles starting to appear questioning the narrative with any degree of seriousness. What did I say? Just 1 hour on prime time and this is over. It is, entirely honestly, deeply depressing to see how little we've achieved when all I needed was to have a job as a reporter. Maybe I should have applied. I am profoundly grateful that I've made a difference in people's lives, but 4K views of video when any reporter in the Mail, Guardian, whatever can reach tens of millions of people and fill their heads with lies or, God forbid, the truth. Maybe I really should get a job with the media, for next time. But yes, Italy, 20%. So yes, I encourage you to pay attention to that little meter, but frankly I doubt I need to. I found it compelling just seeing it above all else on the charts. Wait till you see Belgium and France, and of course then compare it to the Far East. So here we go. Italy, our original benchmark along with Hubei, and boy oh boy, taking a while to get down again. So much for a symmetrical curve. But at least it is properly declining. Wait till you see Sweden. I don't buy into tragedy, but Sweden breaks my heart, seriously. But that's for later. Italy, you've served your master well, to borrow from Elizabeth, but at least it's almost over. And now by regions, Africa and Algeria. Look at the lyometer, aka mortality. Where'd it go? Where'd who go? Name that movie. Algeria, not what I'd call a first world superpower, no offence. So do they have our scientific resources, our medical resources, our money? Not really. Lucky them. South Africa, niggling that it's climbing, though from a very low level. Zambia, a poor nation devastated by... No, apparently not. Barbados, we won't read too much into it. It's only a teensy-weensy wafer-thin little island. Yeah, it's going to be an evening of movie references. But lucky Barbados, huh? Plucky Brazil, a long mature curled chart, still climbing, maybe get to the mid 10k to 100k range. No lockdown, no worse than some lockdown countries. Definitely better, way better at the moment. See what I mean about the mortality meter? An invaluable little gizmo. Brazil Covid-19 barely registering as a factor in their daily deaths to date, still only at 23% on their worst day so far. Canada, and I'm surprised to see how low that mortality meter is. Go Canada. Lingering death up top on log scale, but actually it has come down dramatically. If you can preserve freedom, then now's the time to act. It's over in Canada. Don't let them rob you of your freedom or pump you full of vaccine when you've done so well for a Western nation. Your 5.6 death days is a shameful joke compared to the Far East, 0.2 death days, but all of ours are, and at least your politicians are allowing your death counts to go down. I do love Ecuador, going to have to visit someday just to see if their airport's open every day, or just when they feel like it. A bizarre relationship to regular data reporting. And it's sad because such a quirky country deserves a break, but it's already at 2.5 Hubei in deaths and still climbing. And mortality is spiking high, though the overall is extremely low, which is good. Mexico still climbing, but look at the levels, not even at 0.6 Hubei, and being a mature, curled over curve, it shouldn't go much past Hubei, and look at the overall mortality. 1.2 death days versus Canada 5.6, US 9.9, yep, up next. Yes, it's still climbing, but who'd be American, hey? Thank God for the wall. Okay, can't help it. Can you imagine massive crowds of Mexicans showing up at the wall to build it higher? Like, what? USA, blessed are we who live in the land of liberty, to be ruled over by the high and mighty, blessed be their name, amen. Sorry guys, but you really need to review that Declaration of Independence thing. But hey, deaths are coming down, sort of slowly, and overall, what, 12%? You gave up your liberty for 12%? Now, I'm a Brit, none of my business, but as you may have noticed, the US has a habit of thinking that what it decides is policy for the world. So could you do us a teensy-weensy little favour and rebel the hell out of this mess and restore liberty? Cheers, yours sincerely, a fan. Austria, birthplace of tyrants, 2 world wars to its credit, home of far-right leaders that we'd know as alt-right or all-right because they're anti-EU, which of course is enough to make them far-right in the media. Great skiing, fond memories, Apfelsaft, Don McLean, and just being old enough to notice girls. I was 18. And a masterpiece of how to bugger the EU and do it right. Textbook. 2 perfect curves, normal humped, separated 15 days, so people do actually take 15 days to die, not 0 days as elsewhere, and look at that mortality. Peak mortality 14%, overall mortality 3%. Anyone who reads the UK or Western press and isn't aware of Austria is either an idiot or asleep or both. Oh, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Has the Western press even mentioned Austria, or was it too busy crowing over Sweden? So not idiots, just gullible. Sad. Not you lot, no. For some bizarre, divine, astonishing reason, we are blessed, and I'm utterly serious, to be in each other's company, because right now, we're the only sane people on the planet. And that sucks. So yeah, share Austria far and wide and be like a kid. Mom, Dad, why can't we have this? Why can't we? It's a good question. Out of sequence, but Germany, South American province, my bad, right next to Austria, go figure. 2 world wars, but credit to defeating the tyrant Napoleon, and you thought it was just brandy. Yep, we're still up, of course. UK 4 wars to free Europe, the only part of the world that matters, so let's call saving that the world 4 times, and history back to being shafted by Rome for the last 2,000 years. Seriously, you think racial tension is a modern thing? Try being a Briton. Tin, tribute, and slavery. Yep. Now, about the reparations bill. In 2019 US dollars, allowing interest, that's about. We may or may not remember to send a receipt. But hey, Germany, I'm sorry, true story. A British officer in our army got his monthly statement of pay, and they got his date of service or something like 1806. So he facetiously wrote to them pointing out that he was owed back pay about 17,109,138.39, whatever. The British Army paymaster accepted his claim and replied, "Dear X, we accept your claim but point out that as the sole surviving officer of the Battle of Waterloo, you are responsible under Queen's regulations for loss of equipment, to wit, 168 cannon, 172,500 rounds of ammunition, 254 horses, 149 carriages, 120,288 pounds of provisions, 21,500 muskets, for a total of 17,109,141.39. You owe us £3. And Germany, don't mention the war. I did once, but I think I got away with it. Basel! Yes, dear. And look at those charts. More perfection, but it's Germany, hey? Perfectly peaked, okay, a bit sharp, 14-day separation, declining a bit slower than symmetrical, 1.8 Hubei in deaths, positively miraculous in Western terms. And where is there more morality? Okay, that should be mortality. 15% on their worst day, 4% overall. 15%, 4%. You should print this out and riot over it. Mom, Dad, why can't I have this? Seriously, has our government never heard of Germany? We obey their rules in everything else. Of course they've heard of the bleeping EU Master Controller. Yet it never occurred to them to call? Hi, Frau Merkel. Do you mind if I call you Frau? Oh, okay. That's fine. Madam Chancellor, no? Obergruppenführer. Oh, not sure what that is, but certainly. Now, about how you're dealing with this crisis. How is it we've been blindly doing what the EU tells us to do since 1974, and yet the one time it matters, we're not even close? Different master? Different agenda? So yes, nail this one to the wall, next to Austria, by Western standards being only 7 times worse than the Far East, is a miracle, and at least they're allowing their charts of deaths to come down. So Alice in Ordnung, back to alphabetical, and look who it isn't. Belgium, home of the EU. And how are you today, Mr. EU, or Ms. EU, or EU? That's Mr., Mrs., maybe, maybe not. I like to be up with the times. Oh, what? Over 100% normal mortality on your worst day? Oh my, that's terrible. And 40% mortality overall? Oh gosh. And your people are dying even before getting to hospital? Oh my God. And 14.7 times worse than Hubei in deaths. 31.1 normal days mortality, basically 150 times worse than the Far East. Oh my God. All that wasted money going to Africa, it should have been here for when it was needed. And look at that, 174% normal mortality on their worst day, 39% overall, it says so in purple. Clap your hands together and pray. People pray for nurses for Belgium. Because they're not lying, sociopathic, power-hungry people who do anything for power and their agenda, and so they're just the worst hit country in the world by reported figures. But the virus doesn't report figures. Politicians do. If I was in charge of, say, a one-world supranational army and police, I'd be straight in there to question them. Sadly I'm not, and sadly there's no prospect of such any time soon, unless a world crisis triggers people's realization that we need to work together and this is a time for unity. And by strange coincidence, I'm seeing a lot of articles these days about how blessed we are as the phoenix rising from the ashes of Covid-19 is a greater appreciation of our human values, and how we can be so much happier and achieve so much more if we stop worrying about ourselves and focus on working together in harmony. And it's just one world away. A teensy-weensy one world government, a teensy-weensy one world army and police, and a teensy-weensy injection to get you in the right frame of mind. It won't hurt a bit, you'll be dead. Or not, who knows. At this point it is beyond farce. Maybe there are well-meaning people out there in the media, but their naive trash suggesting we're all in this together just sickens me. What we? We the people that weren't consulted when the government decided to end democracy. We the people that didn't immediately rise up and say, over my dead body. We the people that split into compliant sheeple and rebel seekers, some of whom made their way here, some to other channels, for sanity, for solace, for hope, for the chance to fight back. There is no unity. It is another false meme, maybe deliberate, maybe just genuinely naive sheeple people reporters. But no, you don't get to take my country and say I should now comply. I'm only sad that so many people are just shrugging or naive or are whatever they are. So GFY Brussels, London, New York and wherever your masters live. And no, that's not good for you. I really should do this one again. Sorry, but there is indeed no normal, not right now, maybe not ever, when the agenda is right there in the figures and nobody in the mainstream notices or cares. Croatia, oh gosh, in Europe but nowhere near Belgium, and look at that mortality. Here, let me lend you a magnifying glass. From 179% and 39% for Belgium, 8% and 1% for Croatia. Denmark, sensible Denmark, 15% and 5%, not 179% and 39% for Belgium. Fairly textbook, our simple peak detector, thrown off because they had an early outbreak and then a later one. That's why you get that dramatic right-angle turn for what should be a smooth curl-over. It's actually their initial contagion being over and then adding a second much bigger one. It could be that was just how it played out, but that right angle is distinctive, rare, maybe unique. Maybe it is how it happened, or maybe they just hadn't done their bit yet. Regardless, anyone trying to present Covid-19 as a threat is going to struggle with those mortality figures. But I forgot. They're under lockdown. Lockdown saved them. So yeah, let's jump ahead to Sweden and see what happens when you don't follow the narrative, when you threaten the narrative with no lockdown. Again, that hint of Denmark with an early contagion, done and dusted, but look, it starts again. Okay, fair enough, it could happen, maybe it did, just like they say it did, and look at its dramatic rise. Fine, fast up, fast down, but not if the virus or someone doesn't want to play nice, and there are two indicators here. Those horizontal, let's keep playing, dailies in log normal, though deaths are coming down in linear, and those wavy reports. I swear I've seen them so many times when it starts going dodgy. It's like their random number generator isn't sophisticated enough to avoid looking regular. This is deaths, not testing, which could be, oh, we don't test on the weekend, it's only a global crisis. Now, if it was a galactic crisis, me might work weekends, but no, for global it's 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. This is deaths. Oh, it's the weekend, I can't die yet. Can you call my daughter, tell her I'll be leaving Monday instead? I don't think so. Dying does not go in waves like a pulsar or a lighthouse beacon. This is the one chart I can't stand. Literally, I can look at everything else and I get angry. Take them down, or depressed that I haven't done enough, that I never got that 1 hour I needed. But this chart breaks my heart, because a people are being broken lest they give you hope. Swedish people are literally getting Covid-19 and dying or being reported as such because of you and me. But mostly because of the sheeple. Because even the sheep can realise that, aren't they no lockdown? Why are their figures the same as ours? And look, 13.4 death days, 6 times Hubei in deaths. It's still not as bad as Belgium, it's still only 20% overall with a peak of 72% daily mortality. But they will keep going until the last sheeple turns away happily and says, they should have locked down. That is democracy flatlining. That wavy death line is the heartbeat of control, of malice, of greed, and I so rarely use this word, but of evil. There is no evil, but that is close enough to it that I'll use the term. Whether Swedish people feel that they're suffering or whether they're blissfully unaware that they're being turned into the poster child for obedience, I have no idea. The irony is that we don't even need Sweden. South Korea are proud that they never locked down. Switzerland posted how lockdown would be damaging and pointless. They opted for a control, intermediate strategy, not a lockdown strategy. But do you think the media notices lockdown is lockdown? And Sweden got too much airtime. It was too difficult to call them liars. They're Swedish, just like us, sort of. Not foreign, not communist, not the enemy. So no, the liars meme wouldn't do. They had to die. It's still only a numbers game. Nobody new is dying, or at least that is the implication of that mortality chart. It's not even close to 100%. Not more than normal, though you'd have to go deeper to consider true excess mortality. No, it's a numbers game. Keep racking it up until the lesson strikes home. You disobey, you don't listen to us when we tell you to be afraid, and watch what happens. You die. The irony is Swedes could die at 72% of normal mortality for the rest of the future history of Sweden. And it wouldn't mean anything more than, hey, call it Covid-19. It would become a joke. Instead of deep sixing, presumably 6 feet underground, dead and buried, people would be 19'd. Oh yeah, so sorry to hear about your dad, I hear he 19'd. Yeah, thanks, how's your mum? Oh, fine, thanks. Here is truly the irony of the crisis. What it really highlights, the true crisis, is in the extreme success of our education system to shut down thinking forever, in the vast majority of the population. Hypnotized, drooling, believing whatever they're told, I cannot imagine how terrifying it would be for me to be like that, except it wouldn't, because I'd be hypnotized, drooling. Finland, gosh, virus? What virus? No significant mortality, but that extended profile means they've still racked up 2.1 death days, 10 times the Far East. But 2.1 death days? Finland is allowed 2.1 death days because presumably it locked down. This is why Sweden is so critical to the agenda. Notice that we gave up democracy for 2 days' deaths? But without lockdown it would have been a gazillion deaths. Now, a gazillion isn't a proper number, so let's be specific. 510,000 deaths, or 769,811.3208 per 100 million population, according to Professor Ferguson. A gazillion to 4 decimal places. Go figure. La Belle France, aka Les Miserables, and look, it's got an Eiffel Tower for its mortality chart. Do you think that's New World Order humour? I couldn't even rule it out. 911. Emergency. Yeah, a bit. Oh, I'm sorry, did you think that was a conspiracy theory? We only do analysis using government data, as here the US testimony of a B-757 about to hit the Pentagon. My bad, the image on the left is a patch of smoke from the smoke trail superimposed on a clean background, Photoshop elements, very handy. The image on the right is the B-757. Details count, I wouldn't want to mislead. So, the French are impatient to die, dying only 4 days after entering hospital by comparing its curves, bottom right meter, and case death lag in stats. And I just noticed something. Where's my death rate lag 12? Death rate lag 12 is a key number for detecting fraud, but I was so taken by a recent edition I didn't notice that death rate lag 12 wasn't present. Ouch! What is death rate lag 12? Well, cases are reported when they occur. Deaths are reported when they occur. So the simple death rate is deaths over cases. It's fine as long as you understand it's a mythical figure. No one dies the day they go into hospital, or not generally. Sure, gunshot wound to the chest, I've watched NCIS, and you're in trouble. But Covid-19, Germany and Austria's 14-day separation seems about right. So if I die today, I'm supposed to have come in, say, 2 weeks ago. So if 100 people die today, that's from cases reported 2 weeks ago. So what happens if you lag the deaths back to 2 weeks ago? Is it lag or precess? Whatever. You get the idea. So a 3-day lag is what if people died 3 days back, matched to their cases 3 days ago. It's a slight adjustment. How does it look? Lag 6 days, lag 9 days, lag 12 days. And in those early climbing days, remember exponential growth, Wow, rising so fast, dying so many, terrible it is. But they forgot something, to adjust for lag. You're not supposed to die the day you enter hospital, and if I'd been cruel, I'd have kept going to 15 and 18, but it gets so funny, I took pity on them. 12 days is bad enough. I always knew France looked bad, but there was so much else to point out, I never got around to it. But look at this, it's priceless. French Viagra stays up forever. Hang on, that's not France, that's Italy. Long night and yeah, poor suffering Italy with a touch of Viagra 19. And look at those early day figures. Lag 12 really hurts on the climb up, where 12 days prior cases were far less. 90% mortality on lag 12, 41% on lag 6. So you'd have to deep dive and get their actual records, but basically they're screwed either way. The official figures say people survived only 3 days before dying at a rate of 14%, death rate up top. Maybe that's true, but everyone understands you're supposed to survive a few days. With the official lag of 3 days, when we artificially lag back 3 days, look what happens. We get the identical death rate, 14%. They waited 3 days before reporting higher figures, and we went back to divide into cases 3 days earlier. Same thing, same number, 14%, and everyone was around 80 years of age, implied by death rate per age. What if we lag 6 days, saying people usually survive 6 days before dying? Not much, is it? Now the death rate is 22%. What about 9 days? Surely Western medicine can keep them alive for 9 days. 41%, apparently not so well. And what if we lag 12 days, which is still less than the German-Austrian official lag of 14 days? Then, 90% of our Covid-19 patients have died. You're not going to be surprised to hear that countries, the usual suspects, are actually managing to report more deaths due to Covid than were actually reported as Covid cases. But hey, Western medicine, 12 days and 90% of you are dead. Sorry. Like I always said, the politicians just don't know how to fake the numbers, and sadly they don't care, because they're right. Nobody in the Western media is paying attention to what's wrong, only to what complies with the agenda. Such rich pickings for catching fraud, and not one investigative journalist on the planet. And yet Italy declining so slowly versus such a quick rise, and how big you are, Viagra 19, available from most Western governments. Terms and conditions may apply. Now that's France. See how big and proud that Eiffel Tower is in mortality. And compared to Italy, she's wilting a little faster. Death rate lag 12, 41%. Wow. Well, at least more than half survived. Notice what happens when you have proper data. Austria, official lag 15 days, death rate 3.9%, death rate lag 12, 6%. Not even phased. Germany, 14 days and 4.5% death rate lag 12, 8%, not an issue. Those are proper figures, either real figures or excellent forgeries, but at those levels, who cares? Switzerland jumping ahead, but same deal. 5 days a bit tight, but 5.2% death rate lag 9%, not an issue. Funny that, yet. Spain, home of Franco, home of World War III, the Towel Wars, as Germany and the UK fight for supremacy in reserving the sunbeds, home of more people dying of Covid-19 than had Covid-19. The Spanish lockdown has, by all reports, been particularly draconian, or should that be Franconian? And in their catastrophic rise to martyrdom, passing Italy, did they forget something? It's kind of someone coming in with a Me Too scar or tattoo that turns out to be stick-on, peel-off. You can't just rush in and say, hey, look how many deaths we got. You have to wait for cases. So if you want to boost deaths, you need to boost cases first. Honestly, if this was NCIS, Abby would be shaking her head. These guys are so dumb. But the public are even dumber, and that's all that counts. So we've already got official numbers that show deaths peaking ahead of cases. Yup, in Spain you die of Covid-19 before you get Covid-19. Just wanted to warn you. So if they're that impatient to boost numbers that they haven't even got proper lag, CF Austria, Germany or Switzerland, what happens when we say these deaths today happened to people admitted 12 days ago? Yep, more than 100% of people admitted 12 days ago died, 129% actually. Don't take it too seriously, we haven't examined patient records. It's an indicator like heart rate. It should not be over 100%, it shouldn't even be 100%. Germany unfazed at 8%, Spain 129%. Yeah, very real. Portugal very close to Spain apparently. 4 days lag, again tight, death rate 4.2%, very modest, and death rate lag 12, 16%. Shrug. A bit different from 129% next door with the same virus. If there was one honest reporter or mathematician or epidemiologist in the universities or corporations, this whole charade would have collapsed and been ridiculed with everybody in jail. The most shocking part of this crisis is not the deaths, not even the fraud, not even the sheeple's naivety. It is the deafening silence of every intellect in a position of employment. I know people who are reluctant to speak up because of their jobs. I don't get that, but I do get that. Fine. But not one in the entire country, when professor is a magic password to the front page. That is why I will not be satisfied with any climb down. The entire rotten structure of self-preservation over integrity needs to be taken down. To be a professor is a mark of shame in these times. To be a reporter, a mark of shame. To be an MP, a politician, a mark of shame. I do hope people don't forget. But hey, back to the charts, and oops, there goes lag 12. Sorry about that, it'll be back next time. And Greece so close to Italy, or did I miss something? Or did Greece miss something? Like dying? Yup, Greek physicians and philosophers may not be what they once were, Aristotle, Pythagoras, but you'd think they could still tell if someone died. So why isn't anyone dying? Of COVID-19 at least. 3% peak daily mortality, 5.6 death rate, 1%. Can you read that? Not insulting you, but it's like buddy slap on the back. Can you believe that? 1% overall mortality. Like 99% of our deaths are normal. Nothing to do with C-19. Can you imagine what would be the result if we could somehow stick that on the front page of every newspaper? 99% of our deaths are nothing to do with COVID-19. It would be like giving the finger to Johnson and lockdown, and yet in a country of 66 million Britons, God knows how many have access to the internet, from age 2 probably, though they may not read the news, smart kids, and nobody has noticed that Greece has given the finger to the EU and said, no, you've screwed us too badly in the past, you can swivel. Eurovision Song Contest, nul point, go away. Someday, when I have the leisure, I'm going to study BBC reporting and see by omission and inclusion how they played the game. That will be a key search topic, Greece COVID-19 results. Hungary slow to decline, 0.9 Hubei in terms of deaths, excellent for a Western nation. Look at the mortality meter, 10% worst day, 2% overall. Iceland looked bad because of testing, but in deaths 0.5 Hubei. Peak daily mortality 22%, overall 1%. 99% of deaths during COVID-19 have not been COVID-19. Ireland and back to a loyal EU core nation with a Dublin town mortality at 191% of normal mortality, but overall still only 15% of non-COVID-19 standard deaths. Malta, a small island, fair enough, but not enough data points deaths to show up as a daily death chart or on mortality. Overall 1%. Netherlands, and you die as soon as you get into hospital or sooner. Good to know. Norway, 27 days, case to death, one of the longest. They keep you alive a long time relative to other nations. 0.8 times Hubei in deaths, worst day 10%, overall 2%. A good European result. Poland, another EU member with little love for Brussels, and it shows. 0.4 Hubei in deaths, their worst day 4% of normal mortality, overall 1%. Portugal, we've seen briefly for lag, 2.2 times Hubei, so a higher EU hit, but still only 15% on its worst day, 6% overall versus standard mortality. Russia, a late finisher, looks like past peak in cases, approaching peak in deaths, ultra low level at 0.3 Hubei deaths. So far, 4% their worst day, 1% overall. Gee, not aligned with the West then. Spain, we saw for lag, so I'll include its proper chart, with that missing lag 12 figure reinstated 129% of cases dying. Otherwise, 82% worst day, 28% overall. Even Spain can't look bad enough versus ordinary life. Now, the genius of the lockdown meme is, you don't get it, it would be far worse without lockdown. Strange how lockdown hasn't changed the UK trajectory one iota. But heck, believe what you like. Sweden, we saw earlier, they're just going to keep it going till everyone gets the message. Obey. Switzerland, we saw earlier for lag. Look at cases, that's an almost perfect log normal curve. Just looking at it, slightly skewed normal. 39% peak day, 8% overall, and not lockdown. Control. Turkey, 0.9 Hubei deaths, 6% worst day, 3% overall. Remind me, would you describe Turkey as a core EU member? Oh yeah, it's not an EU member. Lucky Turkey, I guess. UK, 9.4 times Hubei deaths, 65% mortality, lag 12, 266% worst day, but that's a spike, so call it 60% worse, 24% overall. But there are two standout things here. We're not quite as badly off as Sweden, but it's not far off. We're not getting out of this till they've milked it for all they can get. And that death spike lets them get away with an apparent 20-day case to death. Looking at the bottom right, you can see that in fact our deaths peak was ahead of cases peak, another country where you die even before you get the disease. No death stuffing there then. And now we're into the Far East and Australia. And their worst day was 1% of normal mortality, and their overall mortality 0%, which means less than 0.49%. Normal mortality since 29th Feb to 24th May is 85 times 2464 standard. Population deaths is 209,440. Australian deaths per 100 million, 379. So that's 379 divided by 209,440 is 0.18% of mortality. I sincerely hope Australia hasn't given up democracy for 0.18% worth of normal mortality. I'll only include China to remind you that China is essentially Hubei, 86% of cases, 96.4% of deaths from memory, which is why we use Hubei as the reference, not China. China didn't lie, they gave us Hubei. The West lies repeatedly. I'll also point out that if the West goes to war or attempts to punish China for daring to give the West the excuse to end democracy, it will be the worst hypocrisy worthy of nations that gave us 9/11. Indonesia flatlined at 1%, worst day 0% overall, and I've shown you how to create an exact percentage if you're curious. Japan flatlined. Are you getting the message yet? Copy these slides and send them to the media, to MPs, to politicians in your country. Ask why you couldn't have this. South Korea over even before Ferguson published his report and Johnson ordered us into lockdown, flatlined 1% worst day, 0% overall. Malaysia flatlined. New Zealand flatlined. Why do we even need complex analysis? Just the basic charts and their numbers throughout the Far East show the extent of the Covid-19 scam in the West. Philippines flatlined. Singapore flatlined. Thailand flatlined. Vietnam 0 and 0. They had a death and decided to cancel it. India and out of the Far East, which demonstrated just what this virus could have been for us. Trivial, done and dusted. India still climbing from extremely low levels, 1% and 0% for mortality. Iran, not quite Far Eastern, but at 8% and 3%, showing that it doesn't have to be the Far East only getting the good results, declining slowly, but not a threat. Iraq flatlined, Far Eastern style, at 1% and 0%. Israel, not quite Far Eastern at 8% and 2%, but close enough. Pakistan still climbing, but from extremely low levels, 1% and 0%, not a threat. UAE, an almost troublesome experience at 0.4 Hubei in deaths, but nothing close to Western levels, with a 10% worst day and 1% overall. There you go. The answer to the Covid-19 crisis is simple. Don't have a Western government. If you do have one, I suggest you get rid of it quickly. It is toxic and harmful to you personally and to your society. We should be surprised. On a personal and societal note, given that governments are slowly easing off while using second wave memes to keep the crisis going, I'd suggest you adapt to a new model, a society just as deceitful and manipulative as before, but where the compliance of the sheeple has made you personally vulnerable as never before. Work towards being independent of your government, independent of normal going out life, and if you want to avoid being used as a pincushion for whatever passes for vaccine, then you might start figuring out alternate food sources and how to get by without going to shops and restaurants, because chances are without a passport we're going to be locked out of society, and as easy as that we become prisoners, submit or have no life. It is unbelievable that having grown up to the heroism of the Battle of Britain, lived through the hedonism of the 80s, well, it was pretty fun, that I should have to say those words to an audience of the free peoples of the West. Orwell was always a lesson. Sadly, it seems it was a lesson our governments have decided to implement. Silly us, we thought it was a warning of what not to allow. Apparently, somewhere along the line, our education system got diverted and failed to get the message across. Remarkable what happens when you rely on the state to decide what's best for you and your children. It decides, and you get to live with it whether you like it or not. I'm still Andrew Mather, 60-year-old Brit, mathematician, financier, technologist, husband, biker, pilot, healer, whatever. Feel free to get in touch, andrew@peerlessreads.com or andrew@amather.com. Either should get to me.